Hi everyone, welcome back to the Movie Reviewers 100. My name is Scott, also known as Cineram here on YouTube. I do the Thursday videos for this collaboration channel. Our theme this week is post-apocalyptic films. And I was originally thinking about doing the Book of Eli, but then Alan did it, and so I didn't want to, just do the same movie that he did. So I had a little bit of difficulty coming up with a film to talk about. I didn't really feel like doing the Mad Max movies or anything like that, but I was considering doing Aeon Flux, actually, which doesn't appear to be a post-apocalyptic movie, but it actually is. The story behind it is that all of humanity, the surviving members of humanity, are all gathered into one city because there's this virus out there that everyone needs to stay away from the rest of the environment. 12 Monkeys is another post-apocalyptic movie with everyone living underground, and Bruce Willis traveling back in time to before the virus that killed everyone was unleashed to try and, solve where it came from and possibly find an antidote. So they are technically post-apocalyptic movies without really looking like them, with the whole wasteland and everything like that, running around looking for gasoline and water and what have you. Now, the remake of Total Recall is also falls into this group right there. It doesn't look like a post-apocalyptic movie, but it is one. The story goes is that in the 21st century, in the late 21st century, there was chemical warfare all over the world and rendered practically every continent uninhabitable, except for Europe, which is now called the United Federation of Britain, and Australia, which is now called the Colony. And basically you have the upper class in UFB and the lower class in the colony, separated very, very clearly on opposite sides of the planet. The main character is Colin Farrell. He plays a character named Doug Quaid, who is working in a factory, and he's married to Kate Beckinsale, and they have a little apartment together. And he basically travels from Australia to Europe through the middle of the planet in this giant elevator called the Fall. Rockets through the middle of the planet. And then he works in the factory putting together robots, and then he goes back home again. He's really not happy with his lot in life. He feels very dissatisfied. And so one day he's tempted to go to a company in his neighborhood, which is called Recall, where they advertise they will give you fake memories. They will concoct an adventure or a vacation for you in some exotic location. They will implant these memories in your head, so when you wake up, you will believe that you actually did that thing, or that you will have the experience. You have the memory of having that experience, basically, that exciting time, whatever it was that you wanted. So when he goes to Recall, he talks to John Chose, the technician there, and says, "I want a secret agent profile." Now, at this point, this is all very similar to the original film that Arnold Schwarzenegger starred in, Paul Verhoeven directed. Sharon Stone, of course, played the wife in that movie. And there's but the key difference here, of course, is that there's a lack of Mars here. They do have this separation between where Doug comes from and this place he's got to go to have his adventure. So in this case, the UFB would be like Mars, and the colony would be like Earth, except it's, kind of a dump. Actually, I really like Colin Farrell's apartment. I think it's kind of cool looking. He's got great views, but, that's just me. So when he goes to Recall, he requests a secret agent fantasy. He wants to have the persona of a double agent, someone who's skilled with weapons and martial arts and goes on this big, espionage adventure. And so when they plug him into the machine and they start everything going, they realize something is wrong. They try to unhook him. They demand to know why he's there because they think he's a spy for real and he doesn't know what they're talking about. And then a whole bunch of soldiers run into the room and shoot everyone there and then try and take him into custody, but he takes them all out with some martial arts moves and shoots at them, and he doesn't he has no idea what's going on here. So then he goes on his adventure. He discovers that he had his memory erased and that he's actually a spy for real, and then he has to accomplish this mission, and it's just all really confusing to him, and he's trying to, sort through what's happening and what's real and what's not. And of course, the key question here is whether or not he's actually experiencing this for real, or whether or not this is just the fantasy that was concocted for him that he paid for, the service that he paid for at Recall. And with the original film with Schwarzenegger, they leave this question sort of hanging. It seems to be answered midway through the movie, where a guy comes in and tells him this is all fantasy that he's been having, but Doug thinks that he's lying, and so he keeps going on with the adventure until the conclusion of the movie. And it's never shown at the end that it actually is a fantasy. You're left at the end of the movie with the message that this actually happened. And it's the same with the new version of Total Recall. There's no cutaway back to Recall with Colin Farrell strapped in the chair in the end. Oh, it was actually all a dream, because the way it ends, it looks like his adventure is over, and that it actually was real. But there's a couple of hints during the course of both movies that indicate that this is not actually the case. And the first is the implausibility, the sheer coincidence of things happening that is just mind-boggling. In the original version, Doug, the Schwarzenegger character, meets a woman named Melina when he goes to Mars. And this woman actually showed up on the computer monitor at Recall when he was having his profile work through. They say, "What kind of women do you like?" And so he gives them a basic description of the kind of woman that he'd like to meet, one that he finds attractive. And they select a profile, which has the image of the same actress who plays Melina in the adventure as is on the monitor. You see what I'm saying here? It's like they pick this woman for her, and then she shows up in the adventure. That's your first indication that this is all, you know, a big fantasy, and that it isn't actually really happening. Now, it's a little bit more subtle in the remake. There's nothing so blunt about it, but there are a number of instances in which characters kind of show up out of the clear blue sky to either attack Colin Farrell or save him without having any way of knowing that he would actually be there. You know, it's like a bunch of bad guys show up at this hideout. You know, it's like they were just waiting for the right moment to pop in. There was no way that they could know that he was actually there unless he had some tracking device, you know, surgically implanted, and there's no indication at any point that that's actually the case. Not to mention the fact that at one point in the movie, Jessica Biel, when she first meets Colin Farrell, he's basically been dumped out in the middle of this super freeway, and she pulls up in her car right at that point. There was no possible way that she could know that he was there. Plus, the Jessica Biel character, Melina, has no backstory at all. She has no family, she has no job. She is there only to serve as the love interest slash sidekick, partner, whatever, in this adventure that he's having. So this is a very, very, you know, strong indication that what he's experiencing here is a fantasy. And I say he's experiencing it because we're actually watching events play out in sequence. But if this were actually a fantasy that he was having that was implanted by Recall, all he would have of this is the memory. So unlike most movies in which what you're watching is a dramatization of an idea that a screenwriter or a group of screenwriters had, the movie Total Recall is actually dramatization of a memory that Douglas Quaid looks back on. He has this, a series of events and people trying to kill him, people trying to save him trying to complete this mission implanted in his head. But there was no point in his life when he actually experienced this firsthand. It's all something that, you know, happened in the past. So it's an interesting way of looking at watching a film, is that you're looking at something that's already happened, but it's playing out, you know, as though it's in the present. It's a little confusing, but you know how some movies have narration, like in The Shawshank Redemption. You know, I had already served 10 years at Shawshank when Andy Dufresne walked in through the door for the first time. You know, and you're watching all this happen, but you realize, of course, since he's narrating this from from a future point, that all this already took place and he's looking back on it. And that's kind of what's happening in Total Recall here. It's not something you really think about strongly when you see the film itself. It just is something that you can think about afterwards. I have to say that that this movie turned out to be better than I thought it was, although there's certainly a lot that I don't like about it. I think some of the dialogue scenes are pretty lame, especially the very last scene in the movie. The very, very last dialogue exchange in the movie is probably the most lamest, most pointless bit of dialogue to finish up a movie that I've ever seen whatsoever. So I can't give this movie a strong recommendation, but it does have, it's more interesting than I thought it would. Some of the chases are pretty good. You've got a freeway chase, which is kind of like from Minority Report, that's pretty good. But my favorite scene is one where Jessica Biel and Colin Farrell trying to escape from Kate Beckinsale and the robot soldiers in the series of elevators that move up and down and side to side as well. That's a pretty good scene. I really wish they had included a scene early on where Colin Farrell is fighting with Kate Beckinsale, who is supposed to be his wife, but she's actually, you know, a double agent, as it turns out, trying to assassinate him. Oh, that's another thing. Another clear indication this is a fantasy. The bad guys have many, many opportunities to put a bullet square through Colin Farrell's head, and they miss every single time. I mean, sometimes it's doubly implausible here, just because these guys are supposed to be very, very well trained and be very good shots, and they're just always missing them constantly. That's another, you know, strong indication that it isn't actually happening. When she's playing the role of his wife, you know, as a sort of her cover, she speaks with an American accent, but when she switches over to the, you know, the agent who's supposed to take him out, she speaks with her natural British accent, because Beckinsale is from England. And I just would have wished for a moment in which Colin Farrell, in the middle of their fight, would have gone, "Why the heck are you talking like that?" That would have been good. But I have to say the most implausible thing about this whole movie is the fall itself, the giant elevator that travels through the Earth's core from one continent to another. Now, there are a lot of concepts in science fiction movies that you're expected to just accept, like time travel, or faster than light travel, teleportation whatsoever. But this is an elevator shaft, an enormous elevator shaft that travels through the core of the planet, through the molten core of planet Earth. How could anybody possibly build this thing? How could you get the materials and the equipment, the people down into the, you know, it would be immediately destroyed if they put anything down there. It cannot possibly work. And that doesn't even take place in the fantasy. That's well established before, you know, Colin Farrell even goes to recall in the first place. So there you go, there you go. It's all extremely implausible and unnecessary, but it can be a good time if you watch it the right way. If you watch it with the right mindset, then it could be fun. But if you're looking at it as a straightforward science fiction action adventure, you'll probably be bored. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. I appreciate it. We'll have a new theme starting tomorrow probably, so tune in for that, please. Thank you very much again. Have a good one.